Hey friends, Jordan Rudek here. Somehow it's already been a year since I published my first book, A Game in the Life, and I wanted to celebrate that fact by running a special sale so that more folks can have a chance to check it out. Until December 16, the ebook version of A Game in the Life is available for only 99 cents, so I hope you'll take a look if you haven't already, or turn someone new onto it. Thanks, and enjoy the upcoming episode.
Greetings and welcome to the Thirsty Mage, the podcast with dragons on the brain. Welcome to the podcast. I'm David Lloyd, and in this episode we're having a chat about two very different games that both include a dragon in their title. The first being the newly released Dragon Quest III 2D HD or HD 2D, however you want to say it, remake, and the other is a follow-up to Dragon Age: The Veilguard, which I think is Dragon Age 4.
Yes.
Yeah. Here with me is the man responsible for playing both of these long RPGs. It's Jordan Rudek.
Yeah, I just can't stop thinking about dragons, that's for sure. I definitely wanted to follow up on Veilguard because it was really only an hour, maybe an hour and a half or so that I'd played when we first chatted about that game a couple weeks ago. And yes, have been playing Dragon Quest III HD2D Remake. Happy to share impressions being very much further in that game than I am and was in Dragon Age. Didn't review it. Neil did for NWR. He gave it a 9. I told David before we started recording that I was pretty much in line with that score. It is excellent, and I want to talk about why I think it is still an excellent and maybe one of the most or more underrated Dragon Quest games in the series. The one that a lot of folks haven't played yet, which kind of makes sense why they decided to remake that one too.
It was funny, as I was doing up the script, I thought of a really quick, fun game that we could potentially play, because I was thinking of like these dragon things, and I thought we should just go back and forth to see how many dragon games that we can name. Now, just franchises or one-off games, like we could go all day long if it was.
I think we could, yeah.
titles. So
yeah.
So I figure we'll just back and forth titles to see how long we can get. So here I'll start it off. I'll say Dragon Quest, but that will also cover Dragon Warrior.
Okay. So that's the whole series then. Oh gosh, let's see. Put me on the spot here. Does it have to be an RPG, or can be?
No, it can be any game if it's got dragon in the title.
Okay, let's think for a second here. So I guess I'll just say I'll cheat and say Dragon Age, because that's the other game we're going to talk about here.
Like a Dragon.
Another game we talked about earlier this year, Dragon's Dogma.
Oh, that's a good one. Double Dragon.
Oh, that's good. Does Dragon Ball would count? Because there's, it's a TV show, but there's lots of Dragon Ball games too.
Yeah. There's a Dragon's Crown, right?
Dragon's Crown.
Isn't that the one that...
The Vanillaware game?
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah, I think it's got to be Dragon's Crown, right? Something Crown. If it's not Dragon, I don't know what it is, but...
I'll look it up while you think.
Yeah, that's fine. How about... Dragoon doesn't count. Like, I'm thinking Panzer Dragoon, Legend of Dragoon. Yeah. That's not the same thing. Oh, but
no. It is Dragon's Crown.
Okay, it's Dragon's Crown. So how about again, another game we played, or a series we played this year, Like a Dragon.
I said that one.
Did you said Like a Dragon already?
Yeah, it was like the third one.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so early.
We might be stuck now.
No. We've got more. What about Blue Dragon, Xbox game, Xbox 360 game?
Yeah, that's a good one. Oh man, I might be stuck. Now I'm blanking.
I can't believe. Yeah, it was called Dragon's Crown. You're right. Jeez.
I think we hit the end of the game unless you got one.
Might be end. No. Without any prep, that's probably the best I can do.
I'm sure think. There's more though.
Of course, there has to be. Dark Souls. No, trying to think of like different, just going through like genres in my head of other games, and people are screaming at us like, how are you not saying this game?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, I was even thinking like, there's so many dragons in games like in the Elder Scrolls games, but I don't think they have dragon in the title of any of them. Because
No, no, I don't think so. Not any of them.
yeah, yeah, no Dark Souls game has dragon in it, even
No,
though yeah,
even there's always like a big dragon boss or something in one of those games at some point.
yeah. Well, this is a great spot for if anyone has games and you're on Spotify, you can put it in the comments and say why didn't you say this game,
Yeah, please do.
and then we'll say look, it's early in the morning on a Saturday. Just
I'm gonna be
settle
looking it
down.
up today and like, oh, how did we not say this? How did we not say this? And just beating myself up over for most of the
Yeah.
Saturday. But
Well, we
um,
could even leave it open as we talk through the episode. If one pops into our head, we can
sure,
just
sure,
toss it out there.
sounds good. Yeah, we'll
But
do that.
maybe to mask our embarrassment here, then we'll start with the Dragon Quest 3 discussion.
Yeah, yeah, sounds good. I'll ask you later, David, for kind of your experience with the game, any form. But so I came off of I never played the original game on NES. It maybe I rented it and just I found the first three Dragon Warrior games in NES quite inscrutable and just harder to play, especially compared to something like Final Fantasy, which was very very approachable for someone who hadn't really played RPGs before, obviously. Um, there is the mobile port version of Dragon Quest III is also on Switch and other platforms. Of course, you could have played it on mobile as well. Not a great version of the game, but you still get enough from that version to understand kind of what this game is, what it's looking for, what it's doing, and how much growth there has been in the series since the first two games, right? Which are quite simple. And we are getting remakes, HD2D remakes of those next year, which I'm excited about because they're all kind of meant to tell a story, right? Three, one, and two, or three, two, and one, whatever the order is supposed to be, are all connected through a larger narrative.
I think it's 3-1-2.
3-1-2, I think
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, so that's cool. And so you get to see, you'll get to see, I guess, through playing them, like some of the areas being the same and maps being the same and stuff like that. So that's cool. Three is by and large, or by and far, the most sophisticated of those three games. Having dabbled in all three, never finished two. I'm looking forward to that remake of that one in particular next year. But three, yeah, it has a lot going on under the hood. It has a job class system. You can make your own party at the beginning of the game. You can change them out. You can change their classes. There's just so much mechanically that's happening for what isn't really a large game. I would say it's not out. It's not 30, 40, 50 hours or anything like that. I suppose it could be if you want to grind and do all the do some of the post game stuff, which I'm not quite at yet. So I'm about 90-95% of the way through the game. I have gone to kind of a different continent. I don't want to spoil the game here for those who haven't played it. Obviously, this is almost a 35-year-old game. It might be 35 this year or next year, but still, it is a game that I know a lot of folks haven't played yet, and were maybe eagerly anticipating this remake and hearing how it was going to turn out. It is incredibly faithful to Dragon Quest III. It doesn't really change a lot of major things. It's still a turn-based game. It still has the party system, still has job classes, personality types that actually affect your stat growth, which is kind of cool. You can change those personality types through in-game events or through reading books that you find on shelves in the game. You're still collecting mini medals. You're still leveling up, grinding, learning new abilities as you go. And again, like I said, you can change your party members to once they get to level 20, you can change their class and they retain half of their stats, and then start back at level 1. And so by the time the new level 1 gets to 20, they'll inevitably be at a higher their stats overall will be higher because they've retained some of the growth from previously. So that's a neat system. So David, what is your experience with Dragon Quest III? Like, how much have I said so far that you're like aware of, or have you played any versions? Like, where are you at with this game?
My experience goes as far as to say when they released the Nintendo Switch version, I would never play it in my life because it was based on the mobile. So I
Yeah,
have not
yeah,
actually played Dragon Quest 3. I
hmm
almost purchased the Nintendo cartridge though. They
yeah,
had one in the at the retro. I actually seen it in a couple of retro game stores recently, and the $200 price tag at one was like, no chance. Like, this is an NES game. I'm not dropping $200.
That's a
But
lot,
then,
yeah.
I saw it for 150 at another store, and then the gears were rolling a bit, but it was still a little too expensive for me.
Yeah. So what was the price point? You like 100? You would have picked
I
it up.
think
Was that the
I
number?
bet you I would have picked it up at 100.
Yeah. Um, the cartridge. I mean, it must be rare. Like I can't imagine they made a lot of three, and it obviously made so many cartridges for Dragon Quest One because they were giving Nintendo Power was giving it away. But two
Yeah,
and three probably a lot more rare.
and
After these,
four.
and four
There is
incredibly
a
rare.
and
Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah, like I've seen that for 300-400 bucks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was a game that I never came to Super Nintendo, but I think there was a Super Famicom release of four as well. So it's kind of an interesting early cross platform game. Although I guess Atari and Intellivision and stuff like that they were having the same games on their home computer libraries, but for like home console, separating that out a little bit to the Nintendo sphere. Having that cross-platform release wasn't a ton of those. I'm sure there's other ones we could think of, but yeah, no, it's this is obviously the definitive version of this game for sure. Whether you wanted to go back and try the NES one, which I think is very very hard to get back to in 2024, the mobile version plays fine, just looks crap. Like there's no getting around
Yeah,
how ugly it is,
yeah.
especially the overworld sprites and just that top down view does it no favors.
It's that mobile flash looking
Yeah,
stuff. Like,
yeah,
it's just
exactly.
brutal.
Even the sprites in combat are just atrociously ugly, and so you wouldn't want to play that. But having played that and reviewed it actually, and originally gave that a 7.5, that was all based on just the bones of the game being very very sound and just being a solid example of a turn-based RPG with again an interesting job system, um, and just kind of checking off those boxes for that fans of the genre would be looking for. The progression is transparent. The just the ability to kind of collect things in any town you go to. You know, you don't smash the pots in this game like other Dragon Quest games or in a Zelda game or something, but you do find a lot of things just exploring the world, exploring the villages and towns you come to. Whether that's stealing a pair of boxer shorts from someone's drawers, or again finding a book on a shelf, or opening up a pot, or inspecting a pot and finding a mini medal inside. It has those familiar genre hits that kind of keep it, I think, as a game that people would want to be playing in 2024 for sure. So what's new with the remake? I guess that's what people are probably wondering the most. So thinking about the original release and remembering as much as I can about it, then again having spent 15 to 20 hours now with the remake, uh, the the remake seems primarily to be a visual one and a quality of life one, rather than changing kind of main mechanics. The game does feel like it plays very similar to the mobile release on Switch. And I can't speak to the NES release, but just more contemporary versions of this game feel like this one. I think there's Dragon Quest 3 also has a Game Boy Advance, not Game Boy, Game Boy Color
Color, yeah.
remake as well. But I think that plays fairly close to the NES version, if I'm not mistaken. It may,
I actually think it was closer to the S. There was a Super Famicom version,
right? Yeah.
and I
Oh, that
think
one
that,
too. Jeez, yeah.
yeah, because I know for Super Famicom, yeah, they did a bunch of upgrades to the visuals, and then uh, I was reading that the Game Boy Color one had an updated translation,
Okay.
and then was more based upon the Super Famicom improvements. So.
Does it still have that system where you like it's almost like uh, an adventure game where you have to, or a point and click game where you have to choose like talk or use the item or door or whatever. Maybe remember the
Oh,
original release had
yeah,
that menu where you had to
yeah.
select what you're going to
I
do.
don't, I don't think it had that. The other thing I know they added was the introduction.
Right. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, so
Gives you a
that
little bit more
wasn't
story.
the yeah. Yeah, there. I guess the Super Famicom introduced that thing at the beginning with, I guess there's like a Dragon Queen or something.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, so that wasn't in the original NES, and that
Mm,
that got added in yeah, the Super Famicom added it, and then every other one after that, I guess, just continued with
Cool.
that addition.
Yeah, it's funny that it really distinctly has the look of like a Game Boy game. Sorry, I'm seeing screenshots of Dragon Quest 3 and 1 and 2, both Game Boy Color games. But I don't think it has that. Maybe it did go do away with the menu system. Then that's kind of helpful. Oh,
Yeah.
there's the Super Nintendo version. Man, that looks like it looks like, just like Lufia. Um, I can't believe how similar those
It's
games look.
funny that it actually looks like just graphically
Yeah,
before this remake. I feel like the Super Famicom version looks the best. I mean, it should look the best, but it
yes,
to me
yeah.
it does look clearly like the best looking
For
version of the
sure.
game.
Yeah, yeah. So this is yeah, it's funny. It's a game that seems to have gotten a lot of releases, and there's a lot of ways to play this game. I suppose more in Japan, obviously, but yeah, I think this is a game that has a lot of reverence for it, especially in Japan. That folks over there who would be eagerly, anticipating this game, looking forward to it, and maybe one of those games that would really help to launch or propel Dragon Quest fever across that country. Um, and so I wonder if I don't know if it'll do something here like Dragon Quest 11 did. Like that was the big kind of hallmark game that people started really taking notice of the franchise, and just its combination of 3D and 2D graphics, or the possibility to have both. But yeah, for this game, so I think the changes are largely cosmetic, and certainly gorgeous. Like this is a game that looks really really nice. Lots of neat effects with kind of shadows and flickering flames and stuff like that. Um, the magical, it's still kind of that perspective in battle is, you don't see your characters, you see them at the beginning of the fight, and there's a neat little kind of staged, presentation to it where you see the enemies and they're kind of spread out a little bit, and your party of 4 is spread out kind of like in a W type of shape. But then as soon as that, intro screens of the battle is done, it's strictly just, menus, and then the enemy sprites that you see. You do get to see, effects, magical effects or spell effects for sure, and those are obviously more pronounced here, especially compared to what they would have looked like, in any original release of this game, let alone the mobile version. Um, and I'm trying to think back to Dragon Quest XI's kind of spell effects, and I think they might be a little bit more done up here, if I'm not mistaken, because I remember those ones being kind of plain as well. But there's a little bit more flair visually to, swoosh or sizzle, or any of the spells that hit multiple opponents in particular. Those are a little bit flashier for sure. So there's that going on. I think the quality of life is a lot better too. You don't have save anywhere yet, but you do have a really, really um, robust autosave. Like it saves after every battle. It's saved almost after, if you just leaving a town, or in some dungeons it might even save, going to a new floor. So you're never going to lose a lot of progress here, unless, between autosaves or something like that, you miss out on something, or sell something or whatever. But you are still saving at the church in town, or usually it's just a priest or a priestess, or not a priestess, uh, gosh, what is the name? Help me out here, David.
The
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 female.
nun, like a
Yeah,
nun, you
I
mean?
guess you would call her a nun, maybe. Yeah, but anyways, you have a member of the church in the towns, or and sometimes at the beginning of a dungeon or cave or something, and then that's the person you're saving with, or at least early on in the game, getting your party members resurrected for, cured of poison. So again, it has those Dragon Quest trappings that you're super familiar with. Towns generally have, a church. They'll have an inn to save at, a weapon shop, an item shop, and then some of them will have a castle, and you can explore that. Early on in the game, it's really just about choosing your party and kind of exploring, what their abilities are going to be. There is a new job class here, which I think I mentioned during my preview coverage of the game, the Monster Tamer, Monster Wrangler. The Monster Wrangler gains abilities based on how many monsters you capture or convince to join your retinue in the overworld. So this is, I suppose, the biggest addition to the games, that there are monster arenas, and I don't remember if this was part of the original one. I think it's totally new. And the monster arenas can you can put together a party of three monsters to kind of fight in sort of like a Pokemon type battle. You fight against four or five human opponents who each have their own team of monsters that they bring to the arena, and you collect monsters that go to this fellow named Monty, who I think is a recurring character in the franchise, and Monty kind of holds onto your monsters for you. And when you get to the arena, you can slot in different monsters that you've acquired in the world. So you find them in towns or in these little just as you're walking around the overworld, there'll be these little patches of grass or trees or mountains that look different from what's around them. And you walk into them, and it's a little area you can explore. And in those areas, you can find treasure chests, barrels to interact with, pouches of money or gold just hanging on trees, or and sometimes you can find people or even treasure chests. But other times you'll just find a monster hanging out, especially if it's at nighttime. A lot of the monsters obviously come out at night. And then if you sneak up to them, like turn off like the running speed. I found that a lot of times if I was running at them, the monster would run away. But if you walk up to them and just kind of interact with them, they'll go and join Monty at the arenas, so they can become a monster that joins your party for those arena battles. Sometimes you'll find like slime enemies, for example. You only have one slime. He's got a funny name. I can't remember what it is. All the slimes usually do. But as you find more slimes in the world, your original one gets stronger. Like he'll actually level up. So some of the monsters that join your team their stats can go up, their levels can go up. So that's kind of neat. The thing about the monster arena battles is you can't control those creatures. So unlike Pokemon, the monsters just fight on their own. You can choose the tactics, right? Familiar to Dragon Quest fans, the tactics menu where your party members will act based on a set of rules, I suppose. All out fighting or going all out, where they'll just use all their MP, the strongest attacks, strongest spells, strongest abilities, or fight wisely, where they might do some healing or some defending in addition to attacking. So you can give a set of tactics to your monsters in the arena, but you can't actually choose what they do. So that's neat. So you get to watch a little bit. There's a little bit of randomness there. And then you once you beat the five opponents, you collect a monetary prize in addition to a couple of items like some seeds of wisdom or life to boost your stats, or new weapons or stuff like that. To the point where I'm at in the game, there are at least 8 rankings, I guess, of monster fights that you can get to. There might be more than that. I don't know. Maybe I'll find some more. But every single one gets significantly harder, and you have to find new monsters in, I guess, more advanced areas of the game, or go back and find like more slimes, for example, to level up your slime creature, so that he or she can be more powerful in battle. So yeah, the monster gathering and monster wrangler class are definitely new additions to the game. The thing about the wrangler class is that as you collect more monsters out in the overworld, your wrangler will learn new abilities as he or she levels up. So that's kind of a neat way to progress that character, is by incentivizing you to find the monsters in the overworld. I switched my wrangler class to a warrior. Not about halfway through my playthrough. And so I feel like I needed a more beefy offensive type and defensive too. My Monster Wrangler was not taking hits very well. But when you do the job class change, you carry over all of your abilities to the new class, which is really neat. So again, another just an interesting mechanic. You don't have to choose what abilities, and I don't know if this carries forward if you do a third class change. I'm not sure, but at any rate, my warrior has about 8 to 9 monster wrangler abilities, and so he's got a couple of healing ones. He has ones where he summons, like it says you're summoning like your creatures from your party, the ones you've recruited so far, but you don't actually see them on screen. It just looks like kind of a series of fangs kind of biting at the enemy. So I've got an ability like that I use. Which can do a lot of damage, especially to bosses. So yeah, the Monster Wrangler's abilities seem kind of interesting too. And I almost wish I had kept that class just to see more of what abilities I'd gotten or I would get after acquiring more of the monsters. But yeah, he's a pretty cool one. What else is trying to think what else I would need to cover about changes. The autosave I thought was a big one. You can't. Yeah, go
You
ahead.
played the Switch version, right?
I am playing it on Switch. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. It probably is worth talking about performance. No crashes or anything major like that. I think the game still looks very, very good. I played a lot on my TV and sparingly on handheld, which is again not that hasn't been my normal
It's because you
distribution
got that new OLED.
because I'm playing on the OLED. I was just so inclined to play everything on this TV now. Like I'm watching more TV. Like it's bad just from a health point of view that it's got me stuck in my office a little bit more. Just enjoying the screen, but it's been great. So yeah, definitely playing. I've been playing Dragon Age there. We fired up the new Call of Duty Zombies mode for the couple buddies last night too. It looks great there. But yeah, Dragon Quest definitely looks stunning on an OLED TV, and then on the OLED Switch too. Like it's a game that I think is designed no matter where you play it, it's going to look really good. I think you do get 60 FPS on PlayStation 5 if you're playing there, and Steam if
There's
it's
more detailed graphics too.
yeah.
I saw Aiden Mower had was I guess he's got I think it was the PlayStation 5 version and the Switch version, and it was comparing screenshots, and you could see that the details are clearer on
Hmm.
the PlayStation version, and there's also it almost like there looks like there's a bit of a blur in the background. Like
Mm,
look at the further back in the Switch versions, like it's
yeah.
a little more muffled or like just not as focused, I guess. So
Yeah.
there is some detailed, uh, which seems funny because you would think I would have thought the Switch version because it's a pixel game that you'd still
Hmm.
be able to get that level of detail, but I guess there is that small difference.
Yeah, I mean, if someone's buying the game on PS5, like, because you want the absolute best fidelity, like, I guess they have to give them something. There has to be some reason to play that version over the Switch one. But it's not given that I don't think it's a super long RPG. I think wherever you play it is fine. I don't think that portability is an absolute necessity with this one. But to me, at least the way that I play a game like this, there is grinding that goes into it. And I would much rather grind, a handheld than grind on a TV. Like I'd rather be doing something else and just kind of have it in the palm of my hand. Yeah. So this is a game that I think the Switch version. I don't think you're making a lot of major compromises. Like you said, there's probably some visual ones, and obviously I don't think it's going to be 60 FPS. But yeah, I think it's still runs fine. The loading isn't excessive. Right? And there is loading when you go into buildings and into battles and stuff, but it's never more than a couple seconds. So yeah, I didn't notice any major sacrifice being made playing this on Switch. If it seemed again, watching some of the footage out there of the other version, yeah, I can appreciate why you'd play on PS5 if you want the best looking one. But in terms of gameplay and performance, I think you're fine on Switch for sure. I don't think it's much of a sacrifice there.
Yeah,
Um,
well, that's good.
so more on just what this game is. So the objective is that you were trying to find your father, basically, or kind of live up to his legacy. He's an adventurer named Ortega, and where you go, you encounter people talking about his legend, and that they ran into him at some point or had some interaction with him, and they're very fond of him. And so you spend the game. You've just turned 16 years old, and you're kind of you're leaving your home and going out into the world as this fledgling adventurer, trying to follow in your father's footsteps and things like that. Um, but just in terms of like a larger story, it isn't a big part of this game. It's not that you're trying to advance a story and figuring out what's happening next, and it's much more about kind of just exploring the world, progressing your characters, maybe playing with the job class system, and solving the individual problems of cities that you encounter. Someone will be kidnapped. An enemy will be causing trouble. You'll have to define like these different keys to open like doors throughout the world. That's kind of the gist of the game. You do know that there's like an archfiend or some larger boss that is causing trouble or is kind of waiting in the shadows. And you do have these kind of interstitials with a spirit or fairy kind of thing that's talking to you and kind of pushing you forward a little bit, which may be new to this version. They may be trying to flesh out the story a little bit, but ultimately, this isn't a game you would play because you're like, oh, I've heard so many good things about the story. It's just not like that. It's much more like just mechanically sound, fun, not bloated at all. Like it feels very lean and to the bone kind of game. So if that sounds like something you're looking for, and you haven't experienced Dragon Quest 3 before, you definitely want to go and give it a try for those reasons. Um, if you've already played a version of this game and you didn't love it, then I don't think you're gaining a lot of extra from playing this version. I don't know that. I guess it would depend on your reason for not loving whichever version you played before. But if you played the mobile Switch version, you're like, oh, I hate this because of the gameplay and story. You're not going to like this one either. But if you wanted just something that looks better, you kind of recognize like that there's a lot of potential for this game, and especially just to watch the taste of the visuals of the mobile release out of your mouth. This is what does that game for you for sure. It's just incredibly solid, lean, enjoyable RPG. And old school RPG fans are going to get the most out of this, right? Because you think about some of the more modern stuff, action RPGs, like there's stuff, a lot more gameplay things going on. This is, traditional turn-based, lots of random encounters. But again, fortunately, depending on which classes you get, there are abilities that kind of negate the random encounters. I think there's some items that do that too. So you can adjust your game or how things progress that way. But yeah, but at the end of the day, like there's grinding, there's changing classes, there's stats, there's moves that you're gaining. Like it's very typical fare. So if that sounds appealing to you, then this is a game you should pick up. If you're a Dragon Quest fan in general and you feel like this is a blind spot for you, I think you'd really start to appreciate just how sophisticated this game was in '88 or '89. Given that they haven't changed too much of how the game actually plays in 2024. So for that reason, just as a historical piece and seeing, how far we've come or how far they had already come in that series so early on, I think it's also worth playing for that reason.
Yeah, it's funny how they all those RPGs back then, around the same time, like in the timeline of their games, started doing like the job class systems. Because like Final Fantasy was the same thing, where it's like I think by I want to say definitely 5 was very job class based, but I'm pretty sure 3, Final Fantasy 3, either 2 or 3 had the job classes too. So it's funny that they were kind of evolving. Like back then, they were separate companies, obviously, so in
Mm-hmm.
competition with each other too. So to see them both going towards those job classes and the subsequent uh, titles or whatever is funny to see that natural progression.
I guess it made sense, right? That you wouldn't want to just be stuck on one class the whole time. Like that's not super fun. Like thinking about like the roots of these games too. Like I wonder about the CRPGs, not being super familiar with them, but that you could go to the beginning of the game or the inn or wherever and change your party, right? That you could, if you had an elf and a wizard, you could switch those out and maybe put in like a priest or a gladiator or cleric or something like that. You could change things up, or even back to like thinking of Dungeons and Dragons too. If you don't like your character, you can change them, right? Bring someone new in. But it was
That's a game series we just forgot.
yeah. Oh my God. Okay, there. Okay, hey, plus
As
one
soon as
point
he
for
said
me.
it, as soon as he says like Dungeons and Dragons, like,
Very
oh
good.
wait a
Very
minute,
good.
they made
Yeah.
those games.
No, and there's tons of spin-offs of
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. There we go. So yeah, the desire to want to change your class does feel built into RPGs, and so we do have a lot of games that have those kind of systems, like you mentioned earlier on, and now today as well. But I think this is a particularly fun system because you get to carry forward what your previous class brought to the table, right? So you're not giving up entirely. Here's kind of what I did with my. So your hero can't change classes, so that is worth noting. Like your hero is the typical Dragon Quest hero class where they're going to gain some offensive magic, some healing magic. They're largely capable as a physical fighter. Their abilities kind of feel tailored to being a sword based one. So you're going to be equipping like some really strong swords later in the game. Um, so they can't change. So what I found is all the items that I would pick up that could boost my stats, I'm just throwing it on my hero character because their class is never going to change and reset their stats or whatever. But the potential for growth seems very high with the other 3 members of your party because you do get that reset where you can build them back up from level 1. And obviously, going from 1 to 20, there's a lot of progression that happens there. So resetting that progression, even though you're losing half your stats, you're gaining much more than that going back to 20 again. There is I was going to do my how my characters progress. So I started off with hero, monster wrangler, cleric, and mage. So I had 2 spellcasters. I changed my monster wrangler to a warrior. I changed my cleric to a thief, and I changed my mage to a cleric because I didn't want to lose out on having a lot of healing spells. And I think it worked out okay. What I regret is I changed them right at level 20, which is the first moment when they are allowed or capable of doing the class change. And I wish I'd kept it a little bit longer for the 2 spellcasters, because I think I missed out on some of the spells I would have liked to get earlier, particularly some of the offensive spells. The nice thing for the cleric is they get the air elemental whoosh and kaswoosh spells, which are quite strong actually, and I like having those. Now that we've gotten a little bit further, so I switched. I actually switched my. I don't think I mentioned that there's a hidden class you can get, the sage, and so I did change my cleric, thief, now sage to. So they did 3 job class changes actually. So they're a little bit weaker right now because I'm still trying to boost them back up to level 20. But they're going to be super capable because they have the spells of the abilities and spells of 3 different classes. So I just like that ability to customize your party. You can kind of make them, I'm tanky mage, like just an all powerful spellcaster. They can be a fighter with lots of different kind of abilities to disrupt the enemy team, whether that's putting them to sleep or hitting them with a different elemental type. The customization, I think, is quite strong in this game. And again, I don't know exactly if it worked the same way with the NES release, but if they've kind of tweaked it or polished it or whatever, all the better, because it's really, really fun to use here and fun to play around with. But yeah, other than that, like this is just a pretty standard Dragon Quest game. It does feel like some of the classic games in the series, like 5 and 8. 8 has more of a story. 5 had some really interesting things as well. Some story beat wise. I don't think the story beats are as strong here. There's some fun vignettes that take place, but largely it feels like a mechanical game. Not to say that that's a bad thing. It's just if you're looking for something like that, I think you'll get into it.
I was seeing comparisons of the graphics to the DS games too. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've seen those.
I because I think you think about the Dragon Age art, right? Like it's all based on Toriyama's work, right?
Yep.
So in trying to be faithful to that, the games haven't evolved visually all that much. Again, you've got the HD 2D style. It's very sharp looking, but the art hasn't changed. It's largely the same that it's been since, maybe the NES releases, it was harder to tell, but I think from Super Famicom, Super Nintendo onward, that gen, the enemies, you can kind of recognize what they look like, right? They're not all that different. And yeah, I think it is just faithful to being a Dragon Quest game. It's whimsical, it's fantastical. It's not trying to be like overly realistic or anything like that. There's a heavy like cartoon anime vibe to it, and so yeah, that continues to shine through, and it's more just like maybe lighting effects or things you see out when you're exploring the towns and the overworlds and stuff like that. I think that one area where I did notice that was particularly attractive, and we always think about this with the HD 2D games, is the water effects, right? There's a couple scenes where there's waterfalls or fountains, and you're just like mesmerized for a few seconds, like, oh man, that looks good. Very early in the game, you get exposed to a whole like a Niagara Falls type of scene where like you're at the edge of a cliff and there's waterfalls all around you as the game opens with this introductory quiz, and you get a heavy dose of the water effects there, and man, they're gorgeous. It's a really the opening of the game, I think, does a great job of showing off like the just the vibrant colors and the kind of particle effects that are happening. Like you're in like a meadow and you kind of see like sunbeams and things kind of floating by, and then you get to this waterfall scene. It's quite captivating actually. So Yeah, I think those are the things I noticed visually. But yeah, you're right. There's not this massive gap between Dragon Quest 5 or 6 on DS, and then 7 and 8, the 3DS remakes, and then Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D. There, where the difference would be is in comparing 11 to 3, or this 3 remake, right? Because 11 had the 3D graphics, and it's trying, maybe aiming for a more mature audience, whereas this game seems to be a little bit more geared towards purists, because it's not, again, I don't think it's such a massive overhaul like 11 would have been.
Yeah.
Like 11 even has there's a combat perspective, I believe, where you see your party. There's nothing like that here. Like you see them for a second at the beginning, but then that's it. Then it's back to the menus. So
Yeah, you can definitely. Well, you can tell like it's the 3D, the move to 3D in the. Well, it's funny too because like the during like PlayStation 2, like those were 3D games, right? And then
yeah,
they
yeah,
and then they 2Di'd them for
that's right.
for 3DS,
That's right.
and then you see
And
it
11
went.
had both, right? You could
Yeah, I
choose,
was
right?
gonna say 11 had both. Yeah.
And so I think what just kind of anticipating or looking forward a little bit with the series before we move to the next game. What I'm guessing is that 12 is going to go a lot heavier in the direction of 11, and maybe in particular the 3D,
With darker
more.
themes too, I think, right?
Yeah,
Isn't
yeah,
that the
just
fire? The logo was on fire or
that's
something like
right.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some like looks like a volcano or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we're gonna have these two streams, right? Kind of like what Yakuza's done with the Like a Dragon games, like these two multiple streams, where you're gonna have your more mature, more maybe trying to get newer people into the franchise that maybe haven't played some of the older games, and maybe they started with Dragon Quest 11, and 12 and 13 and onward are probably going to be in that vein. I don't think they're going to have as many of the older trappings, and they certainly won't have the top down view. I think
You don't think
11.
there'll be another 2D view?
No, I don't. I think
No.
11 was like just a
The
very
last hurrah?
kind of an experimental game, right? Like it had the Switch release, but it also had the 3DS release, right? It was kind of cross platform that way, and then later on the PlayStation 4, or maybe the 4 came out at the same time. But yeah, just an experiment, I think, of really trying to say, here we can do both of these, but we're not always going to do both of these. So I think 12 is going to be
Yeah.
just the 3D style.
I
But
wish I would love to see if Square would release, like, I'm sure they have statistics on who played what version.
yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
not on consoles, but I'm sure Steam has a they'd be able to track like who finished the game in 2D mode and who finished in 3D mode, and I'd love to see the percentage of like who did what.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I want to see if I can quickly dig up how well the game sold on 3DS, because I mean, even that one, I think it had like a pseudo 3D view as well, right? Like it wasn't. It was just just a smaller version of it, but it didn't just have the 2D version. So yeah, what a really interesting game it was. But I think just kind of signaling maybe this departure, this separation to two halves of the classic games and the new direction, I suppose. And so what'll happen is what could happen is Dragon Quest 12 can push the boundaries of the series or the franchise more, because it looks like they're probably gonna just remake all these old games, right? It's kind of criminal that there's no way to play 5, 7, and 8 in particular, ones that I'm really, really fond of on modern platforms, right? 7 and 8 are now trapped on 3DS, or even older if you talk about the PlayStation versions. 5 on DS, and I guess that, yeah, there's maybe a mobile version of that too. God forbid that's the one you
It says
play.
it says 11 sold over 1 million copies on 3DS.
Yeah, and that's not bad, given that it was released on multiple platforms and it never left the West, or never left Japan.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, I think that's not bad at all, especially for an RPG. Um, But yeah, okay, I was gonna say one more thing about that. I think it came to 3DS and PS4 at launch in Japan,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then switched later, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
it's
yeah.
just really,
And
really funny
and the
launch.
3DS version outsold the PS4 version initially.
Yeah, yeah. That, I think that makes sense. The 3DS was massive in Japan, so that kind of tracks. And people might have been waiting for the Switch release at that
It,
point. I don't know if that
and it
was in the
sold
cards yet, but
twice as well as the previous game, Dragon Quest 9.
yeah, yeah. They in order to get more fans to the series, 11 made a ton of sense, right? It was going to be the thing that made the game more mainstream, and I think that came to fruition. It ended up being released pretty much everywhere, right? Um, but yeah, so you've got that happening, and then you have the 2D games or the remakes of these old games. So remake of 3, we've got the remakes of 1 and 2 coming next year, and it won't shock me if they announce next year we're also remaking 4, 5, and 6, and just do them in like groups of 3, right? Because I
Or
think
at
the
least
game,
porting,
yeah,
at the very
yeah,
least. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. They don't all have to be like kind of top down remakes, but if I think if 3 sells well and then 1 and 2 sell well, they'll be like, well, we're doing all of them. It wouldn't stop. It wouldn't make sense to stop at 1, 2, and 3 when you've got 4 through 9 that are heavily in need of a remake and quite beloved, I think, for fans of the series. So
Well, if it's selling, they'll make it.
yeah,
So
totally.
yeah.
I think you and Casey talked about maybe playing this game around the holidays or something like that. Did you guys have a plan for hopping in here?
Yeah, I'm gonna pick it up. It's sometime between now and Christmas. Like if I
Yeah,
don't pick it up before then, it's definitely gonna be on my wish list. Or even worst case, like I would get it on Boxing Day
yeah,
with
yeah.
the gift cards or whatever. So it'll definitely be like an early January game at the latest. So
Yeah. So what we can do is just kind of planning ahead a little bit. Like once you guys play the game, we can do a spoiler cast like early next year,
yeah,
which will be great because again we have the 1 and 2 remakes coming next year. So it's no shortage of Dragon Quest coverage coming up for us, which I love. I think
yeah,
we're pretty fond of these games, and they're just so tried and true, turn based RPG.
yeah.
There's no getting around that. They
As
really do feel like
traditional as it
comfort
gets.
food.
Yeah,
Yeah. But yeah, I didn't want to cannibalize the whole time here with Dragon Quest talk. We'll do a little bit more of that in a couple months and really get into maybe some of the nitty gritty and see if you guys enjoy it as much as I have been. Um, but I do want to leave a little more time for some more Dragon Age, the Veilguard impressions. So I've gotten to like probably the 5 to 10 hour mark now. I'm not sure exactly where in that range I am. But it was funny, after the last episode we recorded where I talked about the game, I played more probably that night or the next, or that weekend, anyways. And I think my feeling about the game started to shift more positive, like right away. It wasn't much more after I had stopped playing that first session where I'm like, oh, this is starting to feel more like Dragon Age. Like I'm meeting more of the party members. There's more kind of choices coming up that seem interesting. Um,
yeah. I
one in
heard the first 4 to 5 hours are a bit dull.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's too bad because I think Inquisition had a little bit of that problem as well of a slow start. I think we mentioned this last
Yeah, I
episode of
think
the getting stuck in
Inquisition
the beginning area.
it had like an initial mission or something that just
Yeah,
went too long.
yeah. Well, it was like the beginning of the open world genre or of RPGs, right? Or it's an early example of that. And yeah, people would get stuck in the first area because it was so large, but not really filled with anything interesting. This game isn't like that. It's more. These are more like smaller zones. There's no big open world sense to this game. There's a connected map which I have opened up. You can fast travel within it quite easily, which is a really nice quality of life thing. But the premise is your character is trying to recruit this team, the Veilguard, and I have all the party members now. So that's happened quite early on. I think before or just around the 10 hour mark, I've got everybody, and now it's a matter of kind of building up my um, reputation with different factions. And so I have party members from different factions, basically, like the Grey Wardens, the Veil Guard, sorry, the Veil Jumpers. One of the early characters you get, Balara. She's kind of a elven kind of mage type, and the Veil Guard, I suppose, are tasked with going into the veil and kind of just making sure that spirits or things don't come out of them. She's kind of like a tinkerer as well, like kind of fixing artifacts and stuff like that. Um, I just recruited a necromancer to my team yesterday. He seems like a Vincent Price type is who I'm reminded
Oh,
of when he
yeah.
talks. He's a kind of debonair and very eloquent way of speaking. He seems kind of a funny guy to have around. He's got a skeleton butler. I think his name is Manfred. So there's humor in the game too. But one of the events that took place kind of shortly after our last recording was I'd gone through a village that was just destroyed by the blight. and you fight a boss at the end, and then you realize that there's a human who was kind of the orchestrator of the blight coming, and he kind of gave into these two elven gods that are basically the big bads that you're chasing. They've kind of been released from the veil or the fade, and your job is to kind of hunt them down, and they're trying to spread the blight everywhere and recruiting all the evil monster kind of factions that are around the world. And so enemy variety is interesting. Combat remains interesting. Yeah. So coming back to this choice, I had a choice to kind of set this guy free, or send him to jail, or kind of just let him rot where he was. And I did feel like that's going to pay off somewhere later. But another choice I came across, it seems like a major story beat choice, is between basically protecting one of two cities that I've been to. So Minrathous is one city, and the other one I'm blanking on the name, but you choose between these two cities, and each city is affiliated with one of your party members. And so each one will kind of say to you, like, we really need help here. Like the city's going to burn if you don't come here. You have two dragons, one from each of these elven gods that you're fighting, and they've sent a dragon basically to these two cities, and you have to choose which one you're going to help. You're going to help protect. And it does seem like there's a noticeable consequence for having not chosen one of the cities, where one of your party members is basically like, I understand why you did it, but, I got to be here for a while. I got to help with the, repairing the damage. I can't be in your party for a while. So they literally like leave your party, and they don't become an option to choose from. But what was really cool was when the party member came back, they had changed. Like literally gameplay wise, they had changed. It says like, this character has become hardened by like the tragedy, I guess, that they had to deal with, the trauma they went through. And so they're no longer going to heal you. They're only going to focus on offensive magic, which is cool. And there's some other little change that had happened to them, like, your relationship with them was going to be halted a little bit, or the progress would be slowed, or something like that. And so I'm like, it's not maybe as subtle as Dragon Age Origins, in terms of how how the events are different, or how different paths you can take will change things. But I don't mind that it's more overt with how a decision affects the game. I'm kind of, as we get older, we're looking for maybe simplification of certain things, and things being classic Romancing Saga 2 remake situation, right? Where we you appreciate kind of where this game came from, but when you're 30 and 40, you kind of just want it to like tell you sometimes, right? As opposed to like you trying to figure it out, or using a walkthrough or a guide or something. So I didn't mind Dragon Age telling me like, okay, this is exactly how your party member is different now. They're not going to heal you in battle, but their offensive magic is going to be really powerful. I'm like, okay, great. Like that's a welcome change, and it's nice to see how. I want to see how that's going to play out. That's kind of where I ended my last session, was with the results of this decision. But I've gone to a lot of new areas. They're not very expansive spaces, but they are. There are a lot of like little things you can collect, like gold and equipment and stuff like that. Your party member is going to maintain a dialogue as you go through, and listening to those is always kind of interesting. I still don't find the protagonist. He's pretty hollow, and he's always putting his hands on his hips for some reason. I don't know why. I don't think they're super compelling, but I think back to like other Dragon Age games too, and it was never about the hero. They always did feel more Avatar-ish, or blank slate than some of the other characters. So this one does have a personality, and I don't find it super interesting. And obviously it is shaped by your responses and stuff too. But I think the party's fine. I do like getting to know them a little bit. I've done a couple of the party member specific quests, which they're easy, but it's just a mode for like letting you get to know them better. And as the party members don't level up themselves, I realize that they level up through your bonds with them. So the more you bring them out, or I think when you make dialogue choices or event choices that they like, or you do their like personal quests, which I imagine there's multiple of those. As you do those, then they gain levels, or their bond level goes up, and then they get new. Their skill trees can be fleshed out a little bit. Their skill trees are actually quite limited compared to yours, or maybe simplified compared to yours. You have this giant, massive skill tree that it's almost reminds me a little bit of the sphere grid from FF10. Just in terms of how large it is, but there's so many different directions you can go as well, and you're not, and the nodes are already filled in for you. You just choose which ones you want to activate.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that I can see how this game is different from earlier Dragon Age games for sure, but I think it's definitely better than two, and I think it might be better than Inquisition as well. Although doing a very similar thing that Inquisition was doing of building up a team, building up factions, getting ready for this big war. It's kind of just redoing that again. So that larger premise is still at play, but it's doing it with better gameplay for sure, and just a little more transparency that I welcome in 2024. So I'm not ready to wholeheartedly recommend this game to everybody, but I am enjoying it. I do look forward to playing it more. So it's definitely checking off boxes that I needed it to check off.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I didn't realize how much of a gap between now and Inquisition it was. Like, it's been 10 years
10
since
years, yeah,
Inquisition.
yeah.
And it's funny to think, like, having a game continue that story when you think, like, your base uh, players all have to be in their 30s and 40s at least at this point if they're
Exactly,
like
yeah.
playing like those original games. Like, if, like, you and I started in the first one with Origins and then
Hmm.
two and whatever, but I mean, yeah, like it would be a bit of some work to try to find like the younger people to come in and be like, oh, this is my first Dragon Age game, and we're on the fourth installment already,
Yeah,
and then they wouldn't have those comparisons back then either, because like we lived through like how Origins was more of a CRPG, and
that's
then
right.
Dragon Age became an action RPG, and then everybody got upset. So then the third one was kind of like didn't really please either side per se, as it
Hmm.
because it was trying to straddle both lines a little bit more, and then yeah, 10 years between the differences, and then I would have to imagine that most of the people that worked on those Dragon Age games are probably
Long gone.
yeah
They might have been around for like the start of like the planning phase, but
yeah.
the game has been in development for such a long time that no, the
And
teams
then if they
to be
were
so
around, they
different.
probably got scared off when Anthem cratered. So
Yeah, geez, or but maybe just got laid off. I mean, there's so many video game layoffs that are still happening now, but even in the last 10 years, for sure.
well, back
Um,
then BioWare was two studios, right?
that's
Was there
right.
was one
Yeah,
in Edmonton, and then I think there's one in Texas, and
that's
they
it.
ended up
Yeah,
closing the Texas one, and then the Edmonton one. I remember there was a big layoffs,
yeah,
and
yeah,
the team, like, I think almost 50%. I think they shrunk. Oh,
yeah. Isn't
I
that
can't remember the
crazy?
exact numbers, but yeah, and then Anthem did them no no
No
favors.
favors at all. Yeah, geez, what a disaster that was. I hope this game sells well because I'd like to see them keep trying out these games. I think this is it's much more of a win than a loss for sure. And I do feel very curious about how it's going to end, and how it's going to wrap up. But yeah, again, I'm enjoying my time with it. I'm happy to be playing it. There are moments where I feel like it has that those familiar Dragon Age kind of trappings that I have enjoyed, especially with some of the choices you're making, and then them feeling meaningful. I still like seeing, like, I make a dialogue choice and I see someone approves and someone disapproves. Like, I like that. That's still fun. Like, oh, this person doesn't like when I'm aggressive, or this person likes when I side with a particular faction, which make that kind of make sense. I like seeing those little like cues come up. I think that's a satisfying small little Dragon Age touch that they've managed to retain. Um, I don't know how strong the overall story is. The writing feels fine. Like I have no problem with it. I think it's good. And then the party. Now that I have the full party, I've been kind of experimenting with different party combinations. In combat, they can actually combo their abilities together. So you can press R1, I think, or R2 to bring up a not a radial menu, but it kind of acts like that, and you can see one party member's abilities on the left, one on the right, and yours are in the center. And then time is basically stopped for you to like set up what their next moves are going to be, what your next spell is going to be. At least as a caster, it looks like this. I don't know if the fighting classes or rogue or a fighter or warrior look a little different, but on my side, it looks like that. It's super easy to set up these magical combos with the characters that I've brought into battle. Even those look pretty flashy, or like what's happening on the battlefield when they've set up a combo. Like that, there's a radius of effect that kind of comes up, and things, explosions, stuff that happens. So it is, yeah. Again, it's hitting those highs, and I think the combat is carrying through any deficiencies that the stories or characters might have. It's kind of pushing me forward, and then just the ease of traveling around the world, the fast traveling, coming up to your characters again to chat with them and see how they're doing. How progression works in terms of you level up individual stores, or at least this one main store that's in your hub, your starting hub kind of area. You level that up, and then you can. It allows you to boost your equipment higher to higher tiers. Yeah, no, I will probably have a final set of impressions to share when I get through the game, which I definitely plan to do before the end of the year, if not just the next few weeks. Now that I'm kind of almost at the end of Dragon Quest, and now that our coverage is kind of posted, I feel that I can get to just slow down with that one, and I'll probably pick it back up again when you and Casey start playing it, if you do by the end of the year, and then we'll all kind of finish it together. But Dragon Age, I'm going to finish in the next month or so, and I'll try to have some final thoughts about the game once I've wrapped it up, rolled credits, and seen a lot more of the game. But I do have a good sense of what it is, and I think that even if you're a lapsed Dragon Age fan, like or wherever you got into in the series, I think there's enough of what that DNA is here to enjoy it. If you're someone who's like, Dragon Age Origins is the only game you liked, and you really liked the CRPG-ness of it, the even the kind of grittiness of it, then this might not be the game for you. Again, it does feel modern in a lot of ways, and just kind of catering to an audience of 2024 in a lot of ways. But I don't see that as a bad thing, even if there's some parts of that I don't like. I still think that it's largely changes for the good, and just change, and also just changes to survive, right? Because, like you said, there's a lot of people who haven't picked up a Dragon Age game in a long time.
Yeah.
So how much you want to be beholden to the past is probably limited, I would say. I can say that there are like name references and characters from previous games who have shown up, and I'm always like, is that so and so from Dragon Age 1 or 2? I think it is, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool how they kind of just insert them, not like out of the blue or something, but I think it does serve a purpose. But it was neat to see some familiar faces, either see them or have their names be spoken by someone in the game, or you read about it in a text note or something like that. I like those little touches too.
I think their biggest struggle to go back to a CRPG is how you're going to compete with someone like Larian. Like Baldur's Gate 3 would like just eat your lunch.
Why would you try, right? Why would you
there's
try?
no point. So, yeah, like sometimes it's one of those things where you have to know your niche, and if you, and because it's so old, like you said, like it's not like people are coming back like, oh, Dragon Age is back to its roots, so here's 2, 3, 4 million people coming back. Like I don't think that would be the case. I think what would more likely happen is it would be a much smaller team that probably hasn't worked with the RPGs, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, this isn't as good as Baldur's Gate 3, so forget it.
I mean, you have a lot of other developers in the RPG space doing CRPGs really well, so there's no need to try and be something that you're not anymore, right? And again, it was really only the first game that it was really only Origins that had those kind of measures. Like 2 and Inquisition didn't really as much. They were trying to do different things, and I think what we can see from this series, across only 4 games, is that it does experiment. It is trying different things out, and it retains like some similarity, some trappings, but for the most part, it's trying to be pushing the boundaries, or just trying to do different things for different audiences. So, I'm curious about how it's going to sell, how it's going to perform. But I will have more thoughts on this, sometime in the next 3 to 4 weeks, I would say.
Cool. Well, I have one more game to add to the list before the end of the episode.
Let's hear it.
Dragon's Lair.
Of course. Oh, yes. Come on. A couple of older dudes like us. How do we not get that one? Jeez.
It's all the talk of like this, the Dungeons and Dragons, and then I start thinking Sword in the Stone.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah.
And then that got me to the Dragon's Lair animation style there.
Nice. Yeah. That's a classic one. I love just looking at that game. I don't know that I like playing
no,
it so
I don't
much.
think it's a game worth playing.
No, that's not super worth playing.
Watch it on YouTube.
For sure, absolutely. Just watch it play through. But when you first saw them in the arcades, obviously that was very, very cool, right? Like that was
Yeah.
kind of those. Oh man, like
Uh,
video games could look
cool,
like this type thing.
cool for anyone who didn't die on the drawbridge and lose
Oh
a
yeah,
quarter immediately.
cool if you're watching someone else play,
Yeah,
not
that's right.
not when you play and you have no idea
Not
what to
sinking
do,
your own
right?
money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Oh my gosh, yeah, what a money sink that game was.
Oh yeah.
All the instant deaths in
Death at
there,
yeah, I
but
was gonna say death at every turn.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, no, it's good. But yeah, I think that'll take us to the end of this episode. Thanks everybody for joining us for an episode all things Dragon, Dragon Quest III HD 2D impressions, and an updated set of impressions for Dragon Age, the Veilguard, which I will have more of soon. And then we'll a bunch of us on the podcast will have some more. Some final thoughts, maybe some spoilery filled thoughts on Dragon Quest III, maybe early next year, end of this year kind of thing. So stay tuned for those. If you have any questions, you can always email David at thethirstymage.com. You can hop into our Discord, which seems to have new folks drop in all the time, which is awesome to see. It's just a fun place. I'm trying to be a little more active there as well, and always reading what people are saying, and happy to at least be privy to the fun talks that are going in there. Most recently, one about your preferred cheese, I think, is where we left off in Discord, of which cheese is your most fond of, or maybe more partial to. So if you want to share some cheese-based opinions, that is the place to do it right now. But that's it for this episode. Thanks again for joining us, everybody, and have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now.
Bye.